Yes, as of August 17th, the rules for buying or selling a home has changed. And here's how it impacts you. Hey, Jose here, your SoCal Realtor. If you are thinking about buying or selling a home, don't hesitate to reach out. My team and I, we're here and ready to help you with your real estate needs. So again, as I just said though, the rules for buying and selling a home has changed. Here's what changed and how exactly it impacts you. First of all, up until the 1990s, there was no such thing as a buyer's agency. In other words, a buyer's agent, their role really was just to help you find a home, help you get into the home to be able to see that home. But that buyer's agent was kind of like a sub-agent of the listing agent. In other words, it really was only the seller, their interests that were being looked out for. I guess what you could say is up until that point, it really was more buyer beware. However, there was a growing realization that buyers needed to be represented too. So in the 1990s, buyer agency was born. And up until just this month, you as a buyer, you could be able to have a buyer agent represent you without having to worry about that buyer agent sending you a bill for it. The whole concept of buyer agency, it was originally drafted with the idea anyway that the cost for a buyer agent was covered or part of the purchase price. Basically, it worked like this. The listing agent would negotiate with the seller on an agreed commission amount. Typically, you were looking at like 5 to 6%. Here in Southern California, it wasn't uncommon to even see that at 4%. But whatever amount that they agreed to, the listing agent would get that from the seller and split that, typically 50% of that, would go to the buyer agent. Technically, it was the listing agent's brokerage would split that with the buyer agent's brokerage.
You, so technical.
And not to bore you with details, because that's not what this video really is about, but there was a lawsuit that was filed back in 2019 alleging that real estate commissions were being fixed, that real estate agents were being unethical, that buyer agents were steering their buyers to go see homes that had better splits for them on the commission. And while I hate to say it, I honestly believe that most real estate agents are good, ethical people. But just as with any industry, I also know that I'm sure there are some that are less than ethical. But the settlement that was reached back in March of just this year, it brought a big change to how the whole workings of the buyer agency agreement. Actually, a couple changes. First of all, nationwide, it is required that before an agent can show a home to any interested buyer, that buyer must sign an agency agreement with that agent, essentially hiring, or maybe better put, creating an agreed business relationship between that buyer and that agent. And honestly, it's very similar to the listing agreement that's signed between the seller and the agent. The other change, that split that was happening between the listing agent and the buyer's agent, that's gone. In other words, the seller pays for their agent and the buyer pays for their agent. Now, I have heard a few people tell me that, well, then that's going to bring down home prices, right, Jose? Because that's a 2 to 3% commission savings that the seller doesn't have to pay now. I don't know if I'd count on that. Well, let me ask you this. Let's say that you're selling your house, and there's a couple other houses in your general neighborhood that sold earlier this year. And let's say they got, and I'm just going to pull a number out of the air, but let's say they got $600,000 for their house. And I mean, your house is equally nice, maybe even a little bit nicer, but it's at least equally as nice as those homes that sold. Aren't you likely going to want to get at least that for your house? I mean, again, their homes aren't any better than yours.
That makes sense.
Now, if you are selling your house, you do still need to negotiate with your listing agent for their commission. The difference, though, is that now you're negotiating only their commission. So instead of that 4 to 6% commission range we were talking about a moment ago, we're looking at more, I'm going to say in the 2 to 3% commission range. And whatever the commission amount is that you negotiate and agree to. Oh, real quick on commission, because obviously, look, we all want to save as much money as possible. But when you have a listing agent that immediately caves, when you tell them, this is what I'm going to pay you and that's it. And instead of negotiating on their behalf, they immediately cave. No problem. Okay. What makes you so sure they're not going to do the exact same thing when negotiating on your behalf? But again, whatever amount it is that you do agree to on your commission amount, this is also a good point where you're going to want to discuss with that listing agent what, if any amount that you are open to contributing to a buyer toward the cost for a buyer agent. Now, let me just say though, yeah, there is no requirement that you have to contribute anything. However, understand that there are other homes for sale within a reasonable radius of your home, and I'm sure there's going to be a number of them that are probably pretty comparable to your home. And make no mistake, those are your competition, and if any of those are offering help toward the compensation of a buyer agent and you're not, there's a very good chance you could potentially end up losing a buyer to them, because today the decision on which homes to see, it is 100% on the buyer. And a buyer could potentially be looking at your house and they start calculating, okay, just how much extra money is it going to take coming out of my pocket in order to buy this house? Because the other house, they're offering help. But listen, if both houses, if they're equally comparable to each other or pretty much comparable to each other, which one would you rather go see? Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that anything is set in stone. In fact, quite the opposite, because anything that you do decide to offer in terms of help, that's 100% negotiable. In fact, here's what I would do. I would not make a decision on an amount up front at all. What I would do instead is I would wait until you get an offer from a buyer, because trust me, I mean, most buyers, they are very likely in their offer to put some sort of request for help for compensating their buyer agent. Unless, of course, they choose to pay their agent on their own, and I'm sure there'll be some that do. I wouldn't expect that to be the norm, because most of the buyers that I have seen or I have worked with, they tend to start getting a little tighter on the cash after they've already paid their down payment and closing costs. But for me, I'd wait until you get that offer or offers and go over that with your listing agent. Go over the numbers and then ultimately negotiate something with the buyer that makes sense for everyone. Here's another way the rules have changed. In the past, your listing agent would enter into the MLS all the information about your house, including just how much that buyer agent would get if their buyer were to be the one to buy your house. Remember the lawsuit steering their buyer to see a house that paid them more? Well, now there isn't anything in the MLS that says how much, or even if you are willing to pay a buyer agent. However, there is a spot in the MLS, at least here locally there is anyway, but there is a spot to enter if you are offering a concession.
Do explain.
The difference between a commission and a concession is, well, a commission is just that. It's you as the seller agreeing to pay a certain amount directly to that buyer's agent, where a concession is you as the seller agreeing to pay an amount directly to the buyer. Common concessions in the past have been helping a buyer with some of their closing costs, or maybe the carpet in your house, it's a little older, it's kind of bad, and you offer a concession of a certain amount to that buyer to help them replace the flooring after they buy your house. There's any number of examples of what a concession could be, but you could offer a percentage or even a flat amount that can be able to be given to that buyer to help them with their closing costs. And the commission that they agreed to pay their buyer agent, that's now part of their closing costs. I would definitely anticipate you're going to get a number of different variations of offer, some with requests for help to be able to be paid toward their agent's commission, some with instead maybe asking for concessions. And as I said earlier, you may even have a buyer that doesn't ask for anything at all because they have the means to pay for their agent themselves. So in the past, you wanted a quality listing agent that could help you with reviewing all those offers that you got in order to determine which offer is going to net you the most possible money from the sale. Oh, that's even more important now than before. Again, as a buyer though, that does mean change because, like I said, agents are now required to have a signed buyer agency agreement with you that officially hires them to be able to work with you and help show you any home.
Please, tell me more.
The length of that buyer agency agreement, totally negotiable. And typically you're looking at probably a 3-month agreement. It could be 6 months. It could even be as short as I'm hiring you for this one house. And before you ask, no, you don't need one to go see an open house. So yes, if you're out on the weekend and you see a couple of signs for open houses, you can totally go check them out. Not a problem at all. Just keep in mind though, that the agent that's at those open houses, they are there representing the seller. So they are going to be a little limited on just what questions they can answer for you. Also negotiable on that buyer agency agreement, the commission for your agent. Yeah, no more concerns of an agent trying to steer you to, I don't think you really want to see this house. You should go see this one instead because that agent wants to get paid more commission. No, you've already negotiated all of that with that agent, exactly what they're going to get paid all up front. It's done. It's already been settled. So any houses that you want to go see, that's 100% your choice. Another question I have heard a few times now, and that is, well, can I go just directly to the listing agent instead? Sure, of course you can. In fact, actually, you've always been able to do that. Just keep in mind, if you do decide to go directly to the listing agent, that listing agent, they're contractually obligated to represent the seller and only the seller's best interest. If this is an agent that sold a pretty fair number of homes over their career, you may get the house, but you're not likely to come out ahead in this purchase, not financially anyway. Now, how do you know if a seller is or is not willing to help you with the cost for your buyer agent? Well, remember earlier I said in the MLS there is a spot that says whether or not that seller is offering any kind of concessions, or your buyer agent can speak directly to the listing agent. Hey, are they offering any concession or any kind of help on the commission, and let you know the answer to that. And if they're not offering any kind of help and you're still okay with that, then tell your agent, hey, let's go see it. Here's another thing regarding concessions. Remember, a concession is from the seller directly to you, the buyer, to be able to use towards your closing costs. Or based on this discussion, your buyer agent. Let's say you and your buyer agent agreed to a 2% commission for their services, but you were able to get 2.25% in a concession from the seller, or maybe even better yet, let's say you were able to get 2.5% from the seller. Well, that difference, remember, the concession goes directly to you as the buyer. So you could take that difference and use it to help you offset some of your other closing costs. Quick caveat to that though, because I am not saying that a seller will or will not agree to that much, but if they do, of course the opposite is true too, because if you and your agent, if you agree to a 2% commission, but that seller is only agreeing to a 1.5% concession, yeah, in this case, that 0.5% difference for your buyer agent, that's gonna come from you. Unfortunately, I do anticipate that there will very likely be cases where you as a buyer, you find a home, you're excited, you want to go see that home, but you end up finding out that seller is not offering any kind of help on commissions or offering a concession. And if that's the case, if you don't have the financial means to take care of that yourself, unfortunately, you may end up having to pass on that home. This, I personally believe anyway, is one of the side effects to these changes. Just like I said though, overall, honestly, I personally like most of the changes. It makes agents work. It helps to weed out the lazy and unethical agents. And overall, I really do believe it benefits both home buyers as well as home sellers. My only concern though is just, as we said a minute ago, if a buyer decides, I'm gonna skip the buyer agent, I'm gonna go directly to the listing agent, I'm gonna go directly to the seller, I think we both agree that sellers are not very likely to lower their sales price just because you don't have a buyer agent. And unless you're a trained and an experienced negotiator, that listing agent probably is. And if they are, you're not likely to save any money. In fact, it could very well end up costing you extra money, or worse, a chance to buy the home at all. Because a quality real estate agent, they do more than just simply put your house in the MLS and sit back and wait or help you go find a home. No, they are trained negotiators. They are there to help navigate you through all the legal obstacles that do come with buying or selling a home. There really is a lot of value as long as you have a solid, quality, competent real estate agent. Of course, if you do have any questions at all, or maybe you are thinking about buying or selling a home here in, or just anywhere near the Inland Empire, my contact information is below. Feel free to reach out. Otherwise, until then, catch you on the next one.